It began with love, or at least that's what they thought it was. 6 Americans, all searching for connection, found a charming man online who seemed to understand them in ways no one else ever had. But behind every affectionate message was a trap carefully woven by a stranger sitting thousands of miles away in Nigeria. By the time the truth came out, over $2.5 million were gone, converted into cryptocurrency, and vanishing through digital smoke. And when the FBI finally closed in, the man at the center of it all had no idea that his next flight would be his last taste of freedom. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us keep uncovering chilling, real-life crimes that educate, warn, and empower people everywhere. Now, sit back, and let's begin the story in full. Love can be blinding, especially when it glows through a screen. Our story stretches across continents, from quiet neighborhoods in the United States to the bustling streets of Abuja, Nigeria. Between 2016 and 2019, 6 unsuspecting Americans fell into a web spun by a man they believed to be their soulmate. He listened. He comforted me. He sent good morning texts and late-night confessions. But while his victims imagined a future together, he was imagining something else. A balance sheet filled with dollar signs. The man behind the messages was Charles Uchenna Nwadavid, a 30-something Nigerian national with a smooth digital persona and a gift for manipulation. He didn't use violence. He used empathy, manufactured empathy, and for his victims, that made the betrayal cut even deeper. The court records refer to them only as victims 1 through 6. But behind those numbers were real lives, men and women from across America who wanted what everyone wants: love, companionship, a bit of hope in lonely times. Victim 1 was a recently divorced woman in her 50s from Massachusetts. Her world had fallen quiet after her children moved out. Then came a message, a kind word from a stranger who seemed to truly see her. She didn't know that she was about to become more than a victim. She would become the unwitting middleman of a massive international fraud. The other 5 victims lived in states across the U.S. They too believed they had found genuine partners. Each story slightly different, but the script identical: promises of a future, stories of overseas business troubles, requests for temporary help to unlock an inheritance or complete a contract. They wanted to believe. They needed to believe. And Charles knew it. What are your thoughts so far? Have you or someone you know ever been approached by a stranger online who seemed too perfect? Tell us in the comments. Your story could help someone else spot the signs before it's too late. It started small, a few $100s to help clear a shipment, then thousands, then tens of thousands. By the time the scam reached full swing, victim 1 had been persuaded to open accounts in her own name and accept transfers from other friends of Charles, not realizing that those friends were his other victims. In less than 3 years, more than $2.5 million passed through her hands. Following his instructions, she deposited the money into accounts at Bitcoin of America, converting US dollars into cryptocurrency. From there, the digital coins bounced through a maze of wallets until they landed at Local Bitcoins, a peer-to-peer exchange, in accounts controlled by Charles Uchenna Nwadavid himself. Each transaction was a clean cut in a money laundering operation that blurred borders and identities. Every dollar vanished into the blockchain, and the victims were left staring at screens filled with broken promises. Most of the victims didn't report the fraud immediately. They couldn't bear to. The shame of being deceived by someone they loved felt heavier than the financial loss itself. Some lied to their families, others withdrew from friends, hiding the truth behind fake smiles. But then, one of them spoke up. A daughter noticed strange withdrawals from her mother's account, then frantic wire transfers to a Bitcoin ATM in Boston. That daughter made a phone call, and that call set off a chain reaction. Federal investigators began digging into the crypto trail. The FBI's Cyber Division and Homeland Security investigations joined forces with local authorities in Massachusetts. At first, the pattern made no sense. Different victims, different states, different excuses. But the destination was always the same: wallets connected to one digital identity, traced back to an IP address in Nigeria. The agents followed the money through exchanges, subpoenas, and cooperation with blockchain analysts. Soon, a name surfaced: Charles Uchenna Nwadavid. He wasn't a ghost hiding in the dark web. He was a real person living in Abuja, operating behind layers of fake accounts and stolen photos. Emails linked to his name matched the metadata in messages sent to victims. One slip, one reused IP address had betrayed him. What drives someone like Charles? Prosecutors later described him as intelligent, methodical, and emotionally detached. He understood loneliness as a market, a resource to exploit. Every compliment was calculated, every romantic line part of a script he had perfected. He used empathy the way others use weapons, not to connect, but to control. Yet he wasn't the stereotype of a hacker in a hoodie. He dressed well, traveled, spoke gently, and appeared deeply religious online. Those contradictions made him even more dangerous because he didn't look like a criminal. In early 2024, after months of international cooperation, a federal grand jury they knew he would slip eventually. Then, in April 2025, they got the alert. Nwadavid had boarded a flight from London Heathrow bound for Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport in Texas. Boston indicted Charles Uchenna Nwadavid on charges of mail fraud and money laundering. The indictment remained sealed as the authorities waited and watched. The agents moved quickly. His visa had already been revoked, but U.S. officials granted him significant public benefit parole, a technical term meaning he was allowed to enter solely so they could arrest him. Hours later, his plane touched down on American soil. He thought he was here for a short visit, maybe even to start a new life abroad. He didn't know that federal agents were already waiting at the gate. As passengers filed off the plane, Charles Uchenna Nwadavid walked calmly through immigration. He handed over his passport, smiled politely, and waited for the stamp. But instead of the thud of approval, he heard a voice behind him, firm, cold, unmistakable. "Mr. Nwadavid, we need you to come with us." Before he could ask why, two agents closed in, badges flashing under the harsh airport lights. In seconds, his wrists were locked in steel. The same hands that had typed words of love were now cuffed behind his back. The romance kingpin of Abuja had just been grounded, permanently. But what happened next was something even Charles didn't see coming. At Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, agents led Charles Uchenna Nwadavid down a corridor few passengers ever see. Silent hallways, cold concrete, and the echo of his own footsteps. The man who had once manipulated hearts from behind a keyboard was now surrounded by federal agents. Every click of the cuffs seemed to punctuate the lies he'd typed for years. Within hours, the news spread through U.S. law enforcement channels. The romance scam architect from Abuja was in custody. His digital empire had finally crashed. After his arrest, Charles was transferred to federal custody in Boston, Massachusetts, the district where his crimes had left the deepest scars. There, prosecutors unsealed the indictment that had been waiting for him since January 2024. The charges: mail fraud, money laundering, and aiding and abetting money laundering. Each carried up to 20 years in prison. When he stood before the court for the first time, observers said he looked calm, almost detached, as if the reality hadn't caught up yet. But behind that calmness lay a man who had built an empire on trust and deceit, and it was all about to unravel. Investigators presented the painstaking digital trail, dozens of emails and chat logs tying him directly to victims across the United States. Bank records showing transfers totaling more than $2.5 million, cryptocurrency transactions traced from Bitcoin of America to his local Bitcoin's accounts. Every conversation, every confession of love, every promise of a shared future had been weaponized to move money. And it worked until it didn't. What sealed his fate was the cooperation of victim one, the woman who, unknowingly, had acted as his money mule. She turned over every chat, every instruction he'd given her. Her testimony became the emotional core of the government's case. She truly believed she was helping someone she loved, prosecutors told the judge. Instead, she was being used to destroy others like her. For the victims, the courtroom was more than a legal battleground. It was a place to reclaim dignity. Some traveled long distances to watch the man who had stolen their trust face justice. They weren't there just for revenge, but for closure. A few wept as evidence flashed on the screen, their private love letters, read aloud in a federal courtroom. One victim said, "I lost my savings," but what hurt most was realizing none of it was real. On the other side, Charles sat motionless. Prosecutors later said he rarely made eye contact, keeping his gaze fixed on the floor. Was it remorse or calculation? No one knew. Psychologists who study cyber fraud describe perpetrators like him as emotional engineers. They identify vulnerability, mirror affection, and slowly rewrite reality, until victims doubt their own instincts. It's not just theft, it's psychological warfare. Months passed as the defense weighed options. With overwhelming evidence, Charles Nwadavid did what few expected. He pleaded guilty on June 26, 2025. He admitted to orchestrating the romance scam and laundering the proceeds through cryptocurrency. In doing so, he spared the victims the pain of a full trial. But the admission didn't lessen the gravity of what he'd done. The plea agreement outlined everything: the romance scam structure, the victims, and the 210 bitcoins that flowed through his hands. It was all there in black and white. September 24, 2025. The federal courtroom in Boston was packed. Reporters, law students, families. Everyone wanted to see the ending of a digital tragedy that had spanned continents. The prosecutor described how loneliness had been turned into currency, how emotion had been stripped for profit. When the judge finally spoke, the room fell silent. "You used love, perhaps the most human emotion, as a tool for greed," the judge said. "This court cannot undo the pain you caused, but it can hold you accountable." Sentence: 2 years in federal prison, 1 year of supervised release, and $224,110.41 in restitution. Some might say 2 years is lenient for millions stolen. But the court considered his cooperation, lack of violent history, and the reality that his victims had already suffered enough emotional damage without a drawn-out appeal. As marshals led him away, one victim whispered, "It's not about the years, it's about the truth finally catching up." For the victims, closure didn't come overnight. Some rebuilt their lives, others still battle the lingering scars of shame and mistrust. Yet many began speaking publicly, warning others about online deception. Their courage turned tragedy into education. The FBI later released a public statement reminding Americans that romance scams are one of the fastest-growing forms of cybercrime, often targeting the elderly and emotionally isolated. In 2024 alone, victims reported losses exceeding $650 million to romance-related frauds nationwide. Charles Nwadavid's case became a case study in how international cyber scams operate and how they can be stopped. Behind every sweet good morning text from a stranger online, there can be a predator calculating your trust. Romance scams don't start with greed, they start with empathy, with the simple human desire to be seen and loved. That's what makes them so devastating. This story isn't just about a Nigerian man or 6 American victims. It's about a global web of deceit thriving on digital loneliness. Every share, every message, every video like this one is a chance to stop the next Charles Nwadavid before he starts. Charles Uchenna Nwadovid once believed he could hide behind screens and fake profiles forever. But in the end, it wasn't an algorithm that caught him, it was people. Victims who refused to stay silent, agents who followed the money, and a justice system that proved even digital criminals leave footprints. His story reminds us, in the modern age, crime doesn't need a weapon, just Wi-Fi and a lie. Thank you for staying with us through this story. If you found it powerful, informative, or emotional, please like this video, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps these stories alive, stories that warn, educate, and protect others from the dark side of the internet. And remember, online love should never cost your life savings. Stay cautious, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode of BYTE Crimes.